In this video, I will prove that Western culture is the most harmful and the ideologies therein. The central attack in Paris is nothing compared to the 500,000 plus people that psychiatry kills in Western country alone annually. And all the world wars and the colonialism and the exploitation, the rapes and the murders that are a result of Western culture directly. First of all, I would like to point out that I am half black and half white. It took me 2 decades of research and soul searching the whole time to come to this conclusion, which is very controversial and difficult to state. But nevertheless, as a man of honor, as a man of principle, as a man of high spirituality and morality, it behooves me to address this inequitable situation that I am faced with. The problems of white denial are an understatement if you were to just focus on those and to leave out the prejudice, underhanded, unsporting nature of this beast known as white culture. Their underhanded tactics are pervasive and they permeate all levels of society. They practice stealthy tactics, furtive techniques, and it is rather pernicious, baleful, and unwholesome. This perfidious culture is quite contemptible and injurious to a righteous man. Now, my argument isn't just that white culture is undignified and that white people are indecorous when they partake in white culture or Western culture. But it is that anybody who would be influenced by Western culture and to help them out is also underhanded, rapacious, and pernicious. Now, some of you may think that what I am stating is racist, but you have to bear with me now. Western culture gave us psychiatry, which has a long history of oppression and repression when it concerns political dissidents. Drapetomania, Samuel Cartwright's somewhat famous description of a quote-unquote mental disorder includes blacks who run away because they must be crazy not to love this sacred culture. The culture that gave us slavery in its most brutal form, with whippings, rapings, and the Willie Lynch letters. A culture which coined the term psychology, psychiatry, and eugenics. The culture which still applies them to this day. You see, it is European culture that is the most harmful ideology for society. Europe gave us World War I, World War II, the atrocities and genocides in the Congo and other places where Europeans, such as Leopold, would take hold. The biggest war in Africa. Oh, I'm gonna have to take a break here. I'll continue. The biggest war in African history was caused by Europeans, not by African aggression. All major genocides in Africa in the last 75 years or so were caused by European greed, manipulation, and whenever European governments that were forced upon the local peoples were dissolved, it created an environment of political strife, chaos, and turning to the European oppressors for a way out and for the upper hand when facing the other tribes, ethnic groups, and political factions in the area. It was European ideologies that caused the greatest massacres by any one person in history: atheism and communism. You see this with Stalin, Mao, and there are others, Pol Pot, etc. Europeans have historically used clandestine means to achieve political goals. And they don't care how many fetuses are aborted, how many people are raped, how many people are killed. We see this with the Freemasons. Nathan Bedford Forrest, who is credited with the creation of the Ku Klux Klan, was a Freemason. Albert Pike, a Freemason. Now let's look at the history of the Ku Klux Klan, and let's see if this supports my assertion that white society loves clandestine means. Their clandestine ideas are part of their culture. Psychiatry and psychology are used as part of Western culture for the furtherance of European imperialism. And white American imperialism we have seen since the late 1700s at least. Listen carefully. They, the Ku Klux Klan, used a variety of tactics to harass and intimidate blacks and sympathetic whites, including burning crosses on the lawns of individuals, arson, riding in groups by horseback near communities they wanted to frighten, and beating, rape, and lynching. So obviously beating is a form of torture. Rape is for personal gain, torture, and intimidation. Okay? The group was outlawed in 1871 by Congress. It was revived again in 1915 as a paramilitary group. In the 1920s, the Klan had substantial political power, especially in the South. It is believed to have had as many as 5 million members in this period. This group also collapsed for a variety of reasons. In World War II, the group was again revived. In the 1960s, it committed a number of high-profile acts to protest civil rights advances. Local groups continue to hold meetings and rallies today. Its rallies, websites, and other expressions of its views are protected by the First Amendment, right to free speech, as long as that speech is not intended to intimidate. So, what we see now, in 2015, is that there are a variety of white hate groups that have infiltrated the highest levels of society. And I would argue perhaps they have always been there. Eugenics and racism, it goes back. Roosevelt agreed with eugenics. Pretty much every European president, every president of European descent we ever had a certain degree of racism. We see that in the Nixon tapes. We see that in their foreign policies, their legislation, and their domestic policies as well. So the problems we are having in society are historical, and they all go back to Western culture. Why these people have the nerve to criticize urban black culture, Islam, African culture, and so on and so forth. The highest form of being a brute and a savage is institutional brutality, institutional savagery, and the promotion of the most deadly cultures by these institutions and their law enforcement agencies. We see countless examples of racist white people forcing their racist social norms on society. And we see gangs helping them. Biker gangs, organized crime, street gangs. In some cases, they are coerced into helping them. They are tricked into helping them. And in some cases, they are offered money and other incentives, such as the mafia, when the government offered to pay them a large amount of money to assassinate Fidel Castro, on record siding with a group that promotes Western culture, European culture. The mafia is Italian. Other mafias, Irish, Russian, Armenian, etc. People of European descent, or rather white people in some cases. So my argument is that Western culture should be eliminated, and it needs to be replaced with something that we all share in common. African culture in its pure form. Anything else is racist, historically incorrect, insensitive, deleterious, detrimental, degrading, and outright wrong, downright unfair. Shall we live in a society and spread the principles of this society, which is full of the most decadent culture, where one has to comport himself as a European, where one must follow the rules of the most oppressive people. And as the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and other similar institutions spread these principles of quote-unquote democracy, are they not instead spreading white social norms and using the ruling class to make sure that it happens? And the Masons who uphold the principles of white culture. Masonry is the acceptance of all cultures into a system of surreptitious white social norms. And then they spread out and spread these white social norms everywhere they touch down, just like the CIA does. The same tactics intended to frighten, coerce, abuse, torture, intimidate political dissidents that was used by the CIA, the Ku Klux Klan, are being deployed by the CIA and our government. We all know that the military continues to experiment. They experiment with weapons. They experiment with ships, tanks, sidearms, planes. And they also experiment with psychological warfare in violation of the Nuremberg. And 6 years after World War II, there was MK Ultra, which blatantly violated the Nuremberg Code. 44 universities and colleges that uphold white social norms historically, such as Stanford, where the president was a eugenicist on record at one point, at least, thought that they were doing this on behalf of the private sector, because on record it was CIA front companies that were funding these covert, illegal, and unconstitutional experiments. So why did they go along with them anyway? Because it was part of white culture to get your way covertly. It was part of European culture to use psychology and harmful, toxic medications to force people to behave in a way that you want. It was part of European culture to claim that the righteous are crazy and to stop them by any unscrupulous means necessary. And the more dirty, the more conniving and underhanded it is, the better in the eyes of those who practice and partake in European culture frequently, if not their whole lives. European culture is the most detrimental culture. And I'm not talking about specific cultures per se. I'm talking about European culture in general. Divide and conquer, colonialism, neo-colonialism, exploitation, subversion. These things, in their modern form at least, are the result and the products of European culture. I would argue that nobody who has a European culture or a white culture should be allowed in any position of power. If Caucasians, Jews, Asians, or any other people who are known to commonly practice European culture and to think that they are superior for it, are to hold positions of power in society, then they should abandon this very decadent culture. European culture kills far more people than terrorism. But there are many social media sites that ban any videos or profiles that express terrorist beliefs or are sympathetic to terrorism or that possibly could be connected to ISIS. When psychiatry alone kills thousands and thousands of more people than terrorism does annually. It kills over 500,000 people in Western countries alone. So why don't we ban the most harmful ideology, which is European, white, and is commonly found all over the globe? These same people will use the European cultural perspective to try to play me out as crazy, when everything that I have said is historically accurate. I have offered countless proofs that I'm correct, and they can't offer a single shred of unbiased, non-prejudiced evidence to the contrary, or that I am out of touch, or that I am mentally ill. This is European culture. If these people seek to separate themselves from white culture, then they must be mentally ill. Dr. Cartwright made that suggestion, and it is still being made to this day. Whenever you have a situation where white people in denial do not want to admit the harm of their culture, millions, if not billions, of people suffer. The number one threat that faces our societies, that faces humanity, is European culture. It is Western culture, I assure you. And I've done this as a half-white person, as a mulatto person. I've done this research for 2 decades into what is the greatest threat to society and how can I do better than my father, as is my African culture, to make your father proud by doing better than he has. He is a brain surgeon, he's a doctor, a neurosurgeon, and he has helped a lot of people. And so the best way to outdo him by far is to address the number one threat to humanity, and that is Western culture. Thank you.